senior Congress leader, former union minister, philosopher, and patron of Indian culture. Dr. Karan Singh is now joining us exclusively to talk about what the COVID pandemic has taught us. Dr. Karan Singh, first of all, how are you? I hope that the last 3 months you have safely restricted yourself inside your home.
Thank you, Jihar. I have done that successfully so far, and hopefully will continue.
Dr. Karan Singh, what do you think is the biggest lesson that we can learn from this pandemic experience?
As I wrote in my Hindustan Times, there are several important lessons, not only one. I first talked about
Yes,
the environment, how suddenly the skies have become blue again, and the birds and butterflies have begun coming out, which were invisible all this time due to the terrible pollution. So I express the hope that when
yes.
we go back, it will not be to the same old polluting situation that we had before. That we would learn a lesson from this, to how nature can be mistreated
It's
and how it is.
interesting you say that, Dr. Karan Singh, because I want to ask you, you've been at the heart of the political establishment for decades. How serious do you think we, and when I say we, I mean the political establishment and also us as individuals, are serious about the environment? I mean, do you think that the lessons you're talking about will be learned?
Not nearly seriously enough to join. I mean, I've been involved in the environmental movement for decades. I was there in Stockholm for the first United Nations conference on the human environment, where our delegation was led by Indira Gandhi and the Swedish one by Olof Palme.
Yes.
From that time, I followed the whole thing. We have had ministries in charge of this, but somehow the sort of high priority that we should give to the environment is not forthcoming. And we're going to pay a heavy price for that.
Yes,
I said,
yes. Well, but that's obviously very unfortunate. Yeah, and you were talking about other lessons. What are the other big lessons you feel that we in India can learn from the pandemic?
unless we start spending at least 3% of our gross national product on health and education, 3% each, we will never be able to build a good India, because our infrastructures in both of these critical areas leave a great deal to be desired, as became clear as far as health. They're doing a marvelous job, but the fact is that we have neglected our health infrastructure over all these years. We have to give it much higher priority than we've had. So in that connection, I also did mention.
It's interesting you say that. I'm just looking at the figures over here. You were saying we should spend at least 3% of GDP each on health and education. So apparently on education we are spending 4% right now, but on health a very measly 1.3%. Compare this to Brazil, which is spending 9.2% on health, South Africa 8.1% of its GDP on health, China 5% on health. Of course, one might add, Dr. Karan Singh, that health, the states have to take the onus as well, because it's largely a state subject in the country.
Of course, I agree. And that's another point that I have made, that one thing has become clear, that we need cooperative federalism, not confrontational federalism.
Yes.
In other words, the states have to be involved in all the major decisions that are made at a national level. Because we are a huge country, and each state in
Yes.
India is 3 times the size of a European country. And so they have got to be involved. And this confrontation between the center and the states, which we see in several areas, is not desirable. Also, I've said that we can't trash the
Dr. Karan Singh, yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I said we can't trash the WHO, whatever its faults may have been. I was health minister for many years and went to many of their conferences. They still represent an important international element. And there I mentioned the whole concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and the fact that no
Yes.
nation is so great as an island unto itself. That's another
It's
point.
nice you say that. India's ancient concept, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, and how much this has proved to be true, with this COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. The pandemics know no barriers, no man-made barriers. And however much many leaders may want to trash globalization, ultimately humanity will sink or swim together in the final analysis. That is another point that I did make in
Dr.
my article.
Karan Singh, now what about the migrants? I mean, we all know what has happened with them during this crisis. My concern, my question to you is that a lot of commentators are saying that, frankly, this shows that we in India are still a classist and casteist society.
Well, classes certainly. I'm not sure about the castes in this particular case because I think the migrants belong to all castes. But certainly, the sight of those lakhs and lakhs of migrants walking hundreds of kilometers back to their homes is a very, very painful one, and one with which we will have to live for many years. It's been a shameful thing. And that just points to the importance of what I have said. Minimum national income has to be there. I think we've come to a stage now where a lot of good schemes are there, I agree. But the minimal national wage has to be there, or we have to at least put some money directly into the accounts of these people. Otherwise, they are never going to be able to survive. And the whole migrant thing has been extremely
You know,
painful. I don't know.
Dr. Karan Singh, you were just mentioning that yes, it's probably true that the pandemic and the migrant crisis has shown us to be a very classist society. But then on the other hand, the argument could be that hierarchies in society are natural. They'll always be there. But I suppose the question is, how do we loosen these hierarchies in our country?
By developing
Because they're
economically,
so prominent over here.
the only way to do that is to
Yes.
develop economically. Because when the so-called submerged castes or the backward castes and classes get employment, start working, they will automatically loosen these rigid caste hierarchies, which unfortunately have been with us for centuries and centuries. But an overall development of the country and a creative and positive education system, I think, can help gradually to improve the situation. And another thing, Jujar, I've mentioned,
Dr. Karan Singh, you're a philosopher. Let me ask you, how much do you think or how much you hope that COVID and the lockdowns have made people explore themselves?
well, that is the last point I made. Before that, I would like to make one more point, and that is that this has given us the
Yes.
opportunity to revisit our family relationships, particularly for the elderly. And, well, I will be, by God's grace, 90 on my next birthday, believe it or not, Gujar. But the thing is that elderly people do not get the attention and devotion and affection that they deserve. I think that is very important in a situation like this. And yes, it gives us an opportunity not only to revisit our family relationships, but to revisit ourselves, look into our inner consciousness, to see what is it really that is the spark within us, that enlivens us, that enlightens us, that can take us onwards in our spiritual quest. We have been forced to look inwards, to sit quietly for a change, not get involved and enmeshed in our frenetic and frantic activities the whole time, which give us no room for us to sit back and think. So when you talk of philosophy, philosophy means the love of knowledge, the love of the beauty of knowledge. And that knowledge, I think, there's lots of knowledge outside, but self-knowledge is probably the most important of all these. That is the higher knowledge has
Yes,
been so.
absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, like you mentioned, that the last 3 months of crisis, and of course is still going on, has given an opportunity to people and the country as a whole to explore themselves and go within. But the problem, Dr. Karan Singh, as you know, is that, once this all abates, we'll be back in the rat race.
Well, trouble with the rat race is that even if you win, you are still a rat. Thing is that we've got to, I suppose everybody's got to make a living, but I think we've got to also uh, take a particular decision that along with our outer lives, whatever it is that we may be doing, it doesn't really matter what we are doing, but whatever we are doing, we also have to have a parallel inner life. We have to have an inner quest, whether it is through the Jnana Yoga, the way of wisdom, the Bhakti Yoga, the way of devotion, the Karma Yoga, the way of work, or Raja Yoga, the way of the breath. We've got to do some of these things also to deepen our consciousness. This is a good opportunity to do that.
Yes. Dr. Karan Singh, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you and to hear your views, which of course are something that, are coming with decades of experience and learning on your path. Thank you so much for joining us, and so glad to see that you're looking well and sprightly as you're approaching your 90th birthday. Thank you very much, Dr. Karan Singh, for joining us on India Ahead.
It's been a pleasure.